Hello. Hi. So, just getting ready to start the last session. Not far to go now. We're almost there. So, yeah, because this is the last session, I realise it's 2 days. It's pretty long. I know there's a few people will just need a little kick, just to get them through this last session. I'll see if there's anyone that obviously looks like actually asleep. No. Yeah. I'll just throw this. It'll be fine. It's just like the microphone. Same effect. Is there anyone that desperately needs Red Bull? No. No, you look like you. Okay, you desperately need Red Bull. Not for you, no. Well, here we go. I don't know if you need Red Bull. Okay, excellent. So, and one other wee announcement is that all the slides will end up on the NZNOG website at some point in the near to medium future. For those who don't know, NZNOG is run out of the conferences are run out of a trust, which allows us to carry the money forward, but the people who do all the work are all volunteers, and we all have day jobs, and we all do other things. So we do stuff when we can. So, yeah. But Richard's an academic, so he'll do it like before the students come back, right? He'll be fine. No, he's nodding, but he's shaking at the same time. He's doing that very special thing. Excellent. So second to last. It's a year nah. So second to last is Ali with the APNIC update. So yep.
Okay, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of those pesky people at APNIC who ask you annoying questions when you submit requests for IP addresses and AS numbers. So, how do I move this along?
It's on the clicker, there should be the... It should be on to the left and right arrows.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, so I'm a person who can't operate a clicker thing. Okay, so I'm going to cover the main things you need to know about upcoming things that you need to know in regards to some recent Whois changes and some changes you could notice when performing updates, etc. Our future focus and some recent policy updates that could actually impact your business operations. And Okay, so APNIC Whois database uses RIPE NCC's Whois database code. So to take advantage of some additional features, we've recently gone through APNIC Whois upgrade. Because it's been a number of years since we've performed an upgrade, we've gone through the process of trying to implement these additional features in a number of stages to help make the process easier. So one of the things you need to know is there has been a new attribute that has been introduced called last modified. Now, last modified is going to replace the changed attribute. Now, one of the problems with the changed attribute is it was not a reliable indicator of when the last update which was put through for an object was performed. So, to help put into perspective what I'm talking about, you can see two examples on the screen. One which contains a changed attribute and the bottom one which contains last modified. So one of the other problems previously with the changed attribute is you'll notice it also referenced an email address. And one of the things we were finding is people who were using the APNIC Whois database to perform queries would sometimes use this email address as a contact email address for spam and abuse complaints, which used to cause caused them issues when they found out it was not a valid email address to use. So, yeah, with the last modified, you'll see now there's no reference of an email address whatsoever, and it's displayed in Zulu time format. Now, we understand, why am I telling you this? Well, we understand that there are a number of members, especially within New Zealand and Australia, who have actually got scripts in place. And when these scripts, when they use them, are used to, when they perform any updates, are used to automatically correspond directly to the APNIC Whois database. Now, because of this, we've decided to go through and implement this attribute in 2 phases. So what is happening at the moment is anyone who submits updates containing the changed attribute, what will happen in the background is they'll still be accepted, but the changed attribute will be totally stripped from the update and replaced with last modified instead. You may be thinking, okay, I don't have a script in place. I don't need to worry about this. Well, the thing is, if you use the bulk upload option within my APNIC, you could face these issues too. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, what will happen very soon, sometime in March, is we're going to implement phase 2. So what will happen with phase 2 is changed attribute will become obsolete, and any future updates you add after the implementation of phase 2 that contain the changed attribute, they will no longer be accepted. So that's just something to keep in mind for those of you who have scripts in place or use the bulk upload option within my APNIC. Something else that has been introduced is a new object called organisation object. Now, this contains business details about a member who has, who is a custodian of internet resources. So it's an object which ties together all of the IP addresses and the AS numbers which an organisation has registered to them. So those, because the resources are mapped together, it's a nice, clean, easy way of reflecting which organisation is actually the custodian of these resources. The other advantage is it helps to bring us in line with other RIRs who have had this in place for a while, like Aaron and Ripe and Sissy. Now, one of the common questions that I used to get attending events like this previously is, okay, I'm a new contact at an organisation. How can I see all the old contacts who are referenced as contacts for resources held by my organisation? Well, because the organisation object ties all and maps all of the IP addresses to an IP addresses and AS numbers to an organisation, this is a nice, easy way that you can see on screen the query that you'd perform to get this data. So for those of you who have not yet, that are in this room, have not yet created an organisation object, how would you go about it? Well, what we've done is we've generated all of the details that we have for all of our member organisations, and we've generated these details, and it's a matter of you just logging into my APNIC and verifying those details. If any details are correct, then you can easily just update them via the screen that you can see. So you can see now that the percentage of members that have created an organisation object are 78%, and you can see in comparison the percent where New Zealand members are in that percentage. So for any of you in this room who have not created an organisation yet, what are the next steps for you? Well, it's a matter of just simply logging into my APNIC. It will automatically take you to that screen I displayed before, and just verifying those details. So it'll literally take you about 1 minute of your time at the most. So in relation to APNIC Whois database, it holds a number of information. So it holds information about resources for IP addresses, AS numbers, which are registered to our members. It also contains information about who are contacts for those resources, along with routing information. So based on some past feedback from the community at APNIC 41, based on this feedback, the community felt that there needed to be some kind of verification process of the data which is registered within the APNIC Whois database. So we're really looking at focusing in that direction in the future. And along with the next at APNIC 42, we gave the law enforcement agencies a chance to put forth their perspective as well. So there could be some policy in the future in the pipeline along these lines. But it's an issue faced not only by APNIC, but other RIRs too. So just a heads up, we are looking at focusing on the quality of our data registered within the APNIC Whois database, and it will not only benefit our members, but another number of different organisation types as well. So anyone will benefit who uses and submits queries to the APNIC Whois database will find this as a benefit. So some initiatives that we're looking at working on is improving IRT contact details. So any contact details registered for an incident response team for a member organisation. Removing orphan objects, so objects that bear no relationship to other objects within the APNIC Whois database. Improving our invalid contact reporting and how we go about it, and how to make this process easier for people reporting these kind of things in future, and along with establishing Whois guidelines. So moving right along, we've covered all the APNIC Whois stuff, but I just want to make you aware before I go some recent policy changes that were implemented in November this year. So the first policy is about prohibiting transfers for address space from the final /8 block. What does this mean? Now, for those of you who use the transfer policies as a mechanism to source additional IPv4 address space, this policy could actually impact you in the way that if you wanted to transfer any address space from source organisations who hold address space from the final /8 block, so anything from 103/8 is considered as final /8 space. The impact with this policy is it prohibits any transfers take place which have been delegated from this block and has been held by the source organisation for less than 5 years. Just for your awareness, there is a proposal in place which will be discussed at the next APNIC meeting about moving this criteria. So that's something for you to consider if if you want to communicate and get involved in the policy process. The next policy is there was an update which took place in regards to the initial IPv6 allocation criteria. With this policy, the purpose of it was just mainly to simplify the process for those organisations who had a larger requirement than a /32. They may have larger networks, so. And the last one was there was an update for organisations who wanted to apply for subsequent IPv6 allocations. So with this policy, it makes it easier for you to apply for a larger subsequent IPv6 allocation, doubling the current resource size. So these last two policies are really have been put in place really to help encourage IPv6 deployment. And for those of you in the room, please take note of the first policy. Please don't call up and say, "Oh, I didn't know about, the prohibition of transfers from final /8 block." You know about it now. So this policy's in place. It's for people like yourselves in the room to get involved in the policy process. We don't dictate policy. We just, it's you yourselves who are part of the community who submit policy proposals and decide whether a consensus is reached on those proposals. We, as an RIR, we really just provide a mechanism to help facilitate this process. So don't complain and get involved. And last of all, the next APRICOT will be held in Nepal from the 19th to the 28th of February this year. Now, if you're not able to attend, you can still participate remotely. Everything is available, so you can watch it all remotely. Everything is recorded, which is accessible to the public, and you can also voice your questions via chat, so there's no reason not to be involved. And later this year, we will also be holding APNIC 46 in Noumea, which will be held in September. This is a little bit closer. It's been a while since the last APNIC meeting was held in Oceania, so it's a little bit closer to people in New Zealand and less flight time. Thanks for listening. Any questions at all? Or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them later.
Excellent. So taking us home is Craig, from Red Cross. Excellent.
It's a slightly thinning crowd, and I realise I stand between you guys and a cold beer or possibly a flight home, so it won't take too long. It's really obvious I'm a Red Cross delegate because I wear free T-shirts and I can't afford shoes. So there's no money in this game. So I am a member of the New Zealand Red Cross IT and Telecommunications ERU. And the ERU is an emergency response unit. We're an international Red Cross Federation tool. We're a pre-packaged IT support, IT deployment unit that when a disaster strikes somewhere and there is a Federation response to that, they put us on a plane and fly somewhere in the world with all our gear and equipment, and we set up and run the IT and communications infrastructure to facilitate the Red Cross humanitarian response. There's not just IT ERUs, there's a whole lot: logistics, water and sanitation, healthcare, hospitals, relief, base camp. These which is the laser pointer one, that one. These base camp people own the biggest tents in the world. It's amazing what they can set up. And I'm in an IT and telecom ERU. New Zealand Red Cross only has an IT ERU. We don't, I think most of these other ones are a little bit too expensive to maintain, so New Zealand doesn't do that. But a lot of other Red Cross national societies around the world will maintain some of these other teams, and collectively we can be called upon in a disaster response. Who has an ERU, IT ERU? At present, Americans, Danish, New Zealand and Spanish Red Cross keep such an ERU. We're a federation tool, but we're maintained by the respective national societies. So the New Zealand Red Cross funds the existence of our team. As I mentioned before, when the disaster strikes and the Red Cross initiates a humanitarian response, a deployment request may come from Geneva saying, New Zealand, please deploy your IT ERU. We get an international full disaster response request probably every 2 to 3 years, but as everyone is probably aware, natural disasters seem to be happening a bit more frequently than they used to, particularly cyclone season. We see a lot more devastation from cyclones, so maybe we're going to be called up more often than every 2 to 3 years, but we kind of share the load around. There are other IT ERUs, they're just currently not deployable for whatever reason. They don't have enough members or lost some funding, but they might pop back up on the radar in a year's time. So, what do we do on a disaster response deployment? We provide IT and communication tools to the local national society and the large inbound group of IFRC, which is International Federation of the Red Cross, delegates. All these delegates come from all over the world. They've got various skills in disaster response in all sorts of different areas, and they help run particular relief parts of the program, and they all got IT requirements. Whether it be, they'll all bring on their laptops and their language and flavour and operating system of their choice. They'll all need communications. It could be VHF radios or satellite phones or some form of connectivity. And we've got to build a network to accommodate and facilitate the whole lot. We do set up mobile radio networks, so it's a little bit of a shift from probably the experience that a lot of people in the room here have, but we get involved in building VHF, UHF radio networks, and also managing and maintaining, in some cases, setting up new old school HF radio networks. You may, if you're older generation in the room, you might be a bit more familiar with the old HF stuff. We set up and manage computer networks. They're pretty simple ones. The Federation has a standardised set of tools and equipment that we'll take into the field. That way we know that when the Americans come along after our first wave of deployment and they come along to carry on, all the equipment we've set up that they're all trained on and familiar with as well. And MikroTik is in our kit. We use MikroTik a lot to set up networks, but we actually have a pretty small amount of network connectivity, small amount of wireless access points and switches, and we end up having to build a large network to accommodate a lot of people, and then fight for Wi-Fi spectrum with all the other NGOs that have turned up and staying in the same hotel to provide similar disaster relief efforts. We do a bunch of stuff with satellite connectivity. We're sometimes using BGAN, which is a broadband global area network. So thanks. Small little satellite terminal. You can just sort of wave around until it starts beeping, and then you sort of leave it in that position and gets you a 256k internet connection, and then we'll put 100 delegates on the end of that. Or we sometimes set up a VSAT, which would be a larger sort of 1.2 metre antenna dish, and carefully align that and carefully realign it every time the wind blows or another earthquake happens or whatever, and that gets us a much larger connection. BGAN is ridiculously expensive. We've come out of a training weekend with a $12,000 bill on the BGAN. It's a $10 per kilobyte or $100 per kilobyte or something. It's insanely expensive access tool. And with the VSATs, we've come out of a disaster response scenario where there's been sort of a 3 or 4 month deployment and the VSAT's been heavily used the whole time, and there may be a $250,000 bill for the data. So it gets pretty big, but what often happens is the provider that we're using for that VSAT might come to the party as part of the disaster relief aid package and say, we'll only charge half that. I think there's been one instance where they wiped it or something that the cost can get up there, but internet's such a critical part of a disaster response these days. You can't do it off paper, and it's really important. Well, after we've set everything up in the first wave, we'll spend the rest of the mission keeping it all working and scaling it up and down as required, and then often moving locations. New Zealand responded in the Nepal earthquake. I didn't go there, but after we'd sort of Red Cross had done a whole lot of work in this area, we uprooted and moved it all over to this area of Nepal and carried on. So there is a lot of maintenance work that carries on afterwards. What do we do in between missions? We're volunteers, we all have day jobs. We meet 4 weekends a year for training weekends here in New Zealand, where we'll just sort of talk about the technologies, refresh our training on various bits of hardware and make sure everyone's microtic skills are up to speed and such like. We aim to be part of a national exercise every year, whether it's a civilian or a defence one. Get involved with that. There was a recent defence exercise called Southern Katapo, where they simulated a lot of civil unrest and some problems in a fictitious country, and it took place here in the South Island. That was a defence-led exercise, but the Red Cross were involved with running refugee camps, and we simulated the whole thing and got involved. And the IT ERU went along and we set up a VSAT, ran some IT systems and got everything set up, and even the military were quite impressed with what we did, so it was good. We carry out a lot of bilateral work with other partner national societies. Basically, that means when Fiji Red Cross say, hey, we need some help, we'll go and help them. So it's predominantly in the Pacific, and there are a lot of Red Cross national societies around the Pacific which lean on New Zealand and Australia for assistance, and we provide it to them in any way we can, generally speaking. We'll go along and we'll do training, teach them how to use their equipment, make sure they're up to speed with how everything works, help them with capacity building type stuff to better prepare them for a disaster, or there we go, disaster preparedness. We do a lot of maintenance. In some of these remote Pacific islands are a long way from anywhere. Maintenance generally doesn't happen. They'll use a computer or a bit of equipment technology, and when it stops working for whatever reason, they just put it on the pile of computers that don't work in the corner of the room and carry on with another computer, or go back to pen and paper or a smartphone or something. So maintenance hardly ever happens, and so we spend a lot of time doing maintenance. And the big thing that I'm involved with is disaster response technology development, and we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. Funding, who pays for all this? So Red Cross is a charity and has a range of fundraising programs right across the country. We're also quite lucky that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, MFAT, they provide some annual funding which goes towards Pacific Island development. Technically, Red Cross is supposed to remain completely neutral and can't accept money from a government if the government is saying you must spend the money on that. That generally is a no-no. We can't be influenced by any government or outside party. But in this case, MFAT or New Zealand Government have got a mandate, and they provide funding every year to help better develop our Pacific Island neighbours, and that's exactly in line with what the Red Cross want to do as well, so we happily take the cash. We occasionally get some project funding from other sources, such as the International Federation of the Red Cross, but they ask you to do a whole lot, they ask you to price a whole lot of stuff up, and seldom ever come to the party with money. DFAT is the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, same as MFAT, the Australian equivalent. They provide funding to the Australian Red Cross for Pacific Island development, much the same as what New Zealand does, but Australia doesn't have an IT team, and they don't have an IT ERU, so when it comes to technology development and IT projects, a little bit of that money comes across the ditch to us, so thank you, Australia. And when it comes to actual disaster response, that's usually funded out of the fundraising, the relief fundraising effort that Red Cross will run for that particular disaster. Every time there's another big natural disaster somewhere in the world, you'll see a number of organisations, no less the Red Cross, will put up a fundraising campaign just for that particular disaster, and everyone around the world donates to that, and it's out of that a lot of the work we do gets funded for that disaster. Technology development programs. So there are 3 which I'll briefly run through today. First one is what we call ZLT, which is Zero Local Touch. It's a robust local IT infrastructure solution that can be used for business as usual and disaster response. And I'll go into the details of that shortly. Another one is RAMP, Rapid Assessment Using Mobile Phones. It's a data gathering tool for disaster response work. And Serval Mesh is the other one. Has anyone heard of Serval? Serval project? Nope, cool. It's getting mobile device communications working without cellular networks in post-disaster communities. All development programs are a conjunction with external organisations. New Zealand Red Cross doesn't actually have its own R&D team. The work we do in it is volunteered from our time, and then we will assist other companies and organisations with what they're doing. So the ZLT. There are 13 different Pacific Island national societies that New Zealand Red Cross can work with. Many of them lack a local presence and skilled IT resource. There are more Pacific Island national societies but some of them are in American or French territories, and Kiwis and Australians so don't need to get involved there. The Americans and the French look after them. In countries where there is a good local IT resource, the national society often struggles to afford them. So as a result, IT is often the last thing that their limited budgets extend to. The first would come paying some staff, then might come some other resources like a vehicle or first aid program equipment or something like that. IT virtually never gets any budget. So the ZLT, funded through New Zealand and Australian Red Cross efforts, will provide a really robust business as usual and disaster recovery technology that they've got a great need for but otherwise won't get. ZLT, it's a comprehensive locally installed resource that provides the majority of their IT needs, and the plan is to remotely maintain it all. So that removes the two major roadblocks for them, which is buying it and looking after it. So this is what it looks like. It's a ZLT. It's an 18 RU cabinet from Eaton called an ExoCab. We started building a pilot solution in November, and we're due to deploy this one next month in Tonga. It's going to be our trial. We've got a lot of international eyes watching this as well, because a few people in the world of Red Cross have tried to build a network in a box type solution, but never really come up with something that's plugged the need in most of these different countries. And so there are a lot of eyes watching us on this. We've got a few key vendors involved. Eaton, they've been fantastic. They have actually, this 18 RU cabinet is a standard model, but they've custom designed an extra extension for us so we can fit a full depth server and UPSs in there. That cabinet is normally designed to just sort of hold batteries or some power supply equipment and sit on the side of a runway to back up the lights when the power goes off type thing. So they've heavily customised the cabinet for us and provide all the power management stack inside it. That on the front is a heat exchanger. A lot of these national societies might be on very small remote islands. In the case of Tawara in the Republic of Kiribati, no part of the island is more than about 200 or 300 metres from the ocean. And so IT equipment and sensitive electronics are just getting a salty middle of the Pacific sea air flowing through it. This stuff just doesn't last long. So this is actually an IP rated cabinet with a heat exchanger passive heat exchanger on the front, well, a fan forced passive heat exchanger. And it's an aluminium construction, powder coated aluminium, so we're hoping to get a pretty long lifespan out of this in the islands, much longer than what equipment would typically last anyway. And we also avoid the impacts of the high humidity in a lot of these areas. HPE have provided the server and compute. Ingram Micro are the distributor, which we're getting most of the stuff through, and they've pretty much put no margin on everything we've bought. They've been extremely helpful with the pricing, as have Eaton and HPE. Fortinet really cut the guts out of the pricing. Fortinet is a networking security vendor. Most people in the room probably familiar with that brand at some point. They've been extremely helpful in the design of things as well. What I've learned through this process is the Red Cross is an incredibly powerful brand, and you don't need to mention it much before people are saying, what can we do to help? And you'll realise at the end of this presentation, this is actually a recruitment drive. So, Serverworks is my IT company in Christchurch. It's my day job. We're building that cabinet at the moment. And also a big shout out to Go Wireless, because they've provided a number of little bits and pieces inside this cabinet. And Dale and his team, they've given us some fantastic pricing. We even get some stuff for them for free. I don't know if Dale knows that. But, so what's inside? So we've got power, network, compute, voice stacks. In the bottom, you can see the UPS server, and then come up to, that's our firewall switch, bit of other fluff in the middle, a voice and IP PBX, and then some power distribution in the top. We've had a lot of fun building it. It's had some interesting tests as well. So in the power stack, we've got a 2.2 kVA UPS with external battery, runtime battery. With everything running and all the VMs running and everything going, we get about 4 hours, which you think in New Zealand 4 hours runtime is fine, but in the islands 4 hours is probably quite common for how long it is between power. Sometimes the power spends more time off than on. So we wanted something that was going to be pretty reliable. We've used true online or double conversion UPS because the power supply is dodgy at best in a lot of these places. Don't know if you know this, but we've needed to use a special high temperature battery with a standard sealed lead acid battery, which is in almost all UPS units. Every 8 degrees above its recommended battery temperature will halve the life of the battery. And your typical ambient temperature of a SLA battery is 25 degrees. On a 30-degree day like this, you're not far from halving the life of that battery. So Eaton have specified that, and they've put in some fancy SLA batteries that will survive the high temperatures that we're going to be putting up within the cabinet. We've got a manual bypass switch for maintenance, so we can remove the whole UPS and keep everything running. We have an input surge protector. I've learned through this process that it's a bit of a misconception that UPSs perform surge protection. They do in a very, very small capacity, but otherwise not. And in an environment where you're dealing with particularly unreliable power, having a separate dedicated surge protection on the input is vital. And we've also got a managed PDU, where we can individually control and monitor each output. So if they come along and plug a vacuum cleaner in, we'll go, hey, that's too much power, and shut the port off, just to sort of focus the resources on what's inside the cabinet rather than out. The networking stack, Fortinet. We've taken the approach of using the Fortinet brand from top to bottom. So FortiGate is the UTM security appliance. We're using FortiSwitch. Everything's called Forti in this land. Just managed PoE switch. We're using their access points. We're using their client software. And then we've got some external that we host back here in New Zealand, some management and data collecting, analysing tools. By using one vendor top to bottom, we can leverage a lot of additional security features. So if a client detects a threat, it'll tell the switch and the security appliance and the access point, and that client can get isolated from the network, cut it off from the internet, but still allow us to get in via RDP or something like that to try and see what's going on and fix it. When you start mixing vendors, you don't quite get that really deep functionality across the board. And these guys have been really helpful. It was quite funny when we said, this is what we're going to do. The New Zealand Fortinet guys going, oh, no one in New Zealand's ever done that before. So it's the first time that we're leading the way. The compute stack, it's an HPE server. It's a DL360, and we're virtualising that. It's really great working in the charity space because you can get crazy cheap Microsoft licensing, and as a result, we can use System Center Configuration Manager to deploy and manage just 10 computers, which in a larger organisation that financially would never stack up, but we can just throw all the smarts at it in this box and get a really reliable and easily remotely managed solution. HPE built a specific high temperature model of the server for us. This one's quite happy sitting at 40 degrees ambient temperature, which is a lot higher than usual. So to achieve that, we had to use only SSD drives and certain kind of power supplies and so forth. We could do a 45-degree version, but it meant going down to just one power supply. And I'm not brave enough to run a server on a remote island 5,000 kilometres away with only one power supply. Asking for trouble. In a typical data centre environment that's got a set point temperature, we usually don't get involved with advanced thermal management of a server. We'd rely on some of the automation built into it. But in this case, we're really learning a lot about how we can, if the temperature does get too hot inside the cabinet, which it will, just exactly what we need to do to pair the resources back in the server to keep it going without it completely shutting down. Voice. Pacific Island National Societies still like phones on desks. Typically got an old analogue PBX that no one knows how to maintain and manage, and so it'll slowly die. What might have been 10 phones on a desk 10 years ago is now 2 phones on desks and 8 in a box, because again, maintenance just never happens. Oh, stop working, stick them in the box. And the box in the corner just gets bigger and bigger. No one maintains things like this, so we're going to put in a Grandstream PBX, thanks Go Wireless, and that'll just still terminate the analogue PSTN lines. If bandwidth allowing, we might connect in a Skype SIP trunk to give them some international calling rates, but generally it's local phone connectivity in their local islands. I was surprised when I started visiting some of these islands that have a sign up for New Zealand Red Cross, and then they'd have 3 phone numbers listed. And in New Zealand, we'd have 1 phone number and the other 2 numbers would step to that first number. But in the islands, they just advertise all the different phone numbers. And you just pot luck until you get one that goes through. So we're going to improve things a bit, work with the telcos and make stuff work a bit better. Cabinet management. Cabinet's pretty cool, quite excited about it. It's IP rated. The entire solution could sit outside in a storm if it needed to. However, it's intended to be inside in a cooler, shaded location. It is a business as usual thing, so it will normally sit in the corner of their office, but if there is a disaster and maybe their building's damaged, if they can get to the cabinet, it's on wheels, they can unplug it, they can wheel it out. 4 burly island boys can lift it onto the back of a ute and they can drive it down the road to maybe where they've set up a marquee to run their disaster response operations, plug it in there and get some network functionality restored and going again. So it's designed to have some portability. Forced airflow heat exchanger. The specifications for it say that with a 600 watt internal load, the internal temperature of the cabinet will be no more than 10 degrees warmer than the outside temperature. So on a 30 degree day, like almost today, it'll be 40 degrees inside the cabinet. We don't have a 600 watt load. We're more like a third of that. Maybe if we really turned absolutely everything on and made everything go full steam, would be half that. So Eaton have actually ponied up the engineering time, and we're going to use their environment chamber in Christchurch in a couple of weeks' time to fully test it in a range of different temperatures just to see how well it'll work and what we need to do when it gets too hot inside it. We monitor everything. We can monitor the fans and the heat exchanger remotely via SNMP. Likewise with the temperature and humidity. And door switches, so we can actually know if someone's opened it up and gone into it, or we know if we can tell if someone's left a door open, and obviously the heat exchanger is not going to work very effectively if it's trying to heat exchange the entire office. This testing is going to be interesting. So and Eaton are not charging for any of it, which is fantastic. In the rear of the ZLT, so the general concept is the front of the cabinet has restricted access. It won't take many things fiddled with in an island really far away to break the whole solution. So the front of the cabinet's got the special key on it and be locked away. The rear of the cabinet, which is actually incomplete, so it looks a bit rough at the moment, but what we've done is we've plumbed all the real-world I/O to the back of the cabinet. So all the switch ports that they need to access, we've brought through to the back here. Some USB ports which come from some internal equipment, phone lines can plug into here. These are an international power outlet, even though a lot of these countries work on the Australia and New Zealand power system. They'll get delegates visiting from the UK and parts of Europe and America, and by having these international power outlets, anyone can plug anything in. No idea how safe they are. We've got a 16-way USB charging panel here. When the power goes off, the only thing they're interested in keeping going is their phones and their tablets. So there's a massive USB charging bank that they can come and plug their devices into and shorten the runtime of the UPS dramatically. And we've got a few other things that there's a switch. So some of these national societies are very cost conscious to the point that at the end of the day they'll turn the power off to the entire office, completely dark, just so no power's getting used overnight to minimise their power bill. The only problem with this is it'll keep going, and they'll go, oh, it hasn't turned off. What do we need to do to turn this off? And start fiddling with it and trying to, because they'll probably still think it's drawing power somehow. So we've put a switch in the back that they'll be able to come in and flick the switch, and that'll initiate a graceful shutdown of everything in the cabinet, and then 10 minutes later the lights will go off and it'll go dark. In the morning they can turn the switch back on and everything will come back to life again. And our monitoring system back home will identify that if we know the switch has been flicked, then we won't monitor everything else until that switch goes back the other way. All the cabling that does come into the cabinet will come through glands in the bottom here to preserve the IP rating of the cabinet. So, internet connectivity. Jonathan Brewer's talked about this in previous NZNOG events, and his information has been really useful, but generally speaking, it's poor and expensive in most island nations. It is steadily improving, but right now it's pretty rubbish. Good example that we're dealing with at the moment is the Solomon Islands. They've got a 128k ADSL connection that performs more like a 40k connection. It costs them New Zealand, the equivalent of New Zealand, $700 a month for that. And they've got 25 people in the office that all want to use the internet, so do the math on that. It's just hopeless. The joke is if you want to use the internet, just come in at 6 o'clock in the morning, because during the day it might even take an hour just to get an email delivered. It's absolutely choked. We'll use the traffic management features of the Fortinet network stack to improve the access to the most important internet resources that they need. We can't do anything about this at the moment because they can't afford to spend more than that. We could put in a VSAT terminal to give them a 20 megabit internet connection, but that'll cost them thousands of dollars a month, which they simply don't have unless someone here wants to pay for it. We'll use the traffic management features of the Fortinet to get rid of heaps of the crap and just get the actual internet traffic that they need coming through so they can better run their operation. Primary internet connectivity in most places DSL. Inside the ZLT, we've also got a 3G, 4G modem by way of a microtik and external antennas. We do have failover between the two connections, and both connections create VPNs back to us in New Zealand. 9 out of 10 island internet connections are behind natted gateways, so we don't get a nice public IP address on the outside of our router. And so it really limits the ability for us to get back there or for them to publish services. So in the internet, the VPNs back to us for management are all initiated from that end. That leaves us pretty stumped if we need to create VPNs between Red Cross branches within a country. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. Cloud computing isn't really an option either. Think of the Solomon Islands. There's just no way that we can smash them all up onto Office 365. They may as well turn the computer network off. So. Management. One of the core objectives of this project is that we can fully manage the solution remotely. We still encourage a local level of support. Our preference is to teach a man to fish rather than give a man a fish. We don't want to completely take away their sovereign right to manage their own solution. But we're providing the much needed skills and resource that we need. And we need remote hands, particularly on in the more further remote islands. All the equipment has some sort of remote management in it. In some cases, we've got out-of-band management. That means we are brave enough to do a firmware update on the firewall. And if it goes pear-shaped, we can come back in through our 3G, and we've got a serial console port connection into the back of anything that has a serial console port. So we've got true out-of-band management. Getting to Tawara and Kiribati, Fiji Airways is the only airline that flies there, and so they've got a monopoly on that. It's about a $5,000 return flight, and it's generally considered quite inaccessible. We don't want to have to roll a truck for a simple matter, so we've designed these things to be as remotely healable as possible. Ongoing preventative maintenance on the solution will be done from New Zealand for now, but in line with this teach a man to fish, we'll eventually try and get an organisation set up in the islands, likely Fiji, that will centralise the support for the Pacific Island from there. So. ZLT for the masses. Red Cross is one of many humanitarian organisations or NGOs around the Pacific. All have the same IT challenges, much have the same IT needs, in particular to improve the usage of technology in disaster responses. So we're really keen to talk to other organisations that might find this pre-packaged, ready to go, monitored, maintained solution. Could be really useful for them. Another technology project we're in, this one's a quick one, is RAMP. It's a data collection thing. So when there's Red Cross is a needs-based assessment organisation, we don't just send aid out. UNICEF and World Food Programme, they'll operate the same way. We'll all go in and do an assessment first and then go, right, you need this, and send it, rather than just give everyone a tent and find people's boats parked in it the next day. We're collecting data with low-cost mobile phones or tablets. Questionnaires are based on paper versions. It's a near instantaneous data analysis in any place, and it can be used for other purposes during normal times. However, it relies on cellular or Wi-Fi for data to get back to a central system. So the standard RAMP is a mobile phone to collect the data, and then a laptop at the other end to develop the forms and then retrieve and analyse the data. Standard RAMP works by the survey questions are created using web-based software. Questionnaires downloaded to the phones. They go out in the field in teams. Let's take Fiji during Tropical Cyclone Winston. Volunteer teams would go out into the highlands and go to those remote villages and go around the different houses in the village and make the individual assessments to determine how many food kits or shelter kits or water and sanitation hygiene kits were required. Collect the data, and then the survey data is then transferred via internet or phone connection to a web server that we can report on at the other end. Extended RAMP adds some satellite communications in the middle of it, because in most cases where we go and do a lot of these remote assessments, there isn't any cellular or Wi-Fi coverage, especially after a disaster. We used to use a device called an InReach, which was from a company called DeLorme. It was quite useful, it was quite good. They gave us a lot of support and had some good APIs. Then Garmin bought them and cut us off. So Garmin aren't particularly friendly to play with when you're asking them for some customisations to APIs. So we jumped over to these people, this device called a Rockstar, and they really are rock stars. They're very helpful. They're quite open with their technology and sharing a lot of API stuff with us to integrate our software with. Now, that uses the Iridium short burst data module, which is a tiny little sort of 1.5" square device, which is capable of receiving and sending via the Iridium satellite network. And we can send short messages or SMS messages. You can actually just ordinary text messaging via it, and you can send just short bursts of data over that network as well, which is ideal for sending back assessment results. So, same as the old process, except now we have a bit of software in the middle called succinct data, and that will compress the data to reduce communication costs, and then smash it over the internet phone or the satellite communication link. And it works really well. A little bit of a picture of the whole process, but I think you understand it. So the problem that RAMP solves is island time. What happened during tropical like Cyclone Winston, which was in 2016, the teams would fan out across the islands with paper-based questionnaires. They'd visit the villages and record the various metrics. Those paper forms would be collected by a team leader who would at some point return them to the nearest branch. Then they'd sit at the branch and wait for a bunch of different forms to come in, and then wait for the next person who's going back to HQ in Suva to carry them back via boat, plane, car or horse. It actually happened by horse. And then there'd be a team in Suva that would manually enter all this information, along with trying to read people's handwriting and the error rate that goes with that, enter it all into the database, and then reports can be drawn from that to make the needs-based assessment. What was happening, we were seeing delays of 5 days in that process. So a village was visited, and it was determined that they needed some health needs, they needed shelter, they needed food, they needed the whole gamut of everything. But that information was taking 5 days to get back to the head office, and then an aid response decision made from that. Extended RAMP can reduce that reporting time down to minutes. So it really does have a massive impact on the vulnerable state of those remote villages. Serval mesh, this is a pretty cool one, quite like this. There's a guy from Flinders University who's been developing this, and Red Cross got involved early in the piece, and we're doing a lot of the testing and evaluation of it out in the islands, and have worked quite closely with Paul Gardner-Stevens on the project. So simply put, it's a telecommunications system comprised of at least 2 mobile phones that are able to work outside of regular mobile phone tower range thanks to a Serval app and Serval mesh. Basically uses Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to mesh with other phones and creates a communication path that they can still message over. It's free, open source Android app. You can actually go and download the Serval app off the Play Store and set it up on 2 phones and not use the cellular network to communicate between them. It's primarily text messaging, social media coming soon. When you're in a post-disaster situation, it's amazing that text messaging is quite enough. You can get away with that to a large extent without needing voice. Now, you could mesh a whole community of people's smartphones together, but you're probably still stuck within the community, and so they've created a mesh extender which can extend the range of this meshing up to many kilometres, and we can use HF, VHF, UHF and satellite to extend that. It kind of treats radio links as building blocks, kind of like Lego. You can sort of build it to how you want it. If it's a remote little atoll, which is 100 kilometres from the main island, you can connect it to an HF radio network. Yep, the data rate over that's going to be pretty slow, but you'll still be able to successfully send messages from a standard smartphone, which pretty much everyone knows how to use. Serval mesh essentially provides the common interface between the disparate radio systems. That's what the box looks like, mesh extender. It's plug and play. You can download the app to cooperating phones. It's fairly universal with its power supply, and it's all open source hardware and software. Collects and retransmits Wi-Fi data. It can retransmit it on alternative media, and you can just plug different radio modules into that box depending on what sort of alternative media you want to use. And you can also put a short burst data module into it so it can communicate via satellite. The VHF, UHF is limited to line of sight. HF radio can communicate over the horizon hundreds of kilometres by ground wave and sky wave, but it's a very low data rate. With the right antenna set up with HF, some of the older school people might know, you can actually talk right the way around the world and back again. Those HF radio and the ham guys, they'll bounce their radio signals off the moon and back to Earth, just to say that they did. Bridging between radio bands, 2 Serval mesh extenders within Wi-Fi range of each other, regardless of which media might be in between them, can move data between it by what they call the Serval rhizome store and forward protocol. It's not necessarily an instantaneous messaging solution, particularly if you've got a really slow data link from the HF radio in between, but it'll store all that data, slowly leach it through to the other end, and then retransmit it out the other end. Modular radio interface designed in, you can plug and play with different radio modules depending on how you're going to use it. This is the guy, Dr. Paul Gardner-Stephen at Flinders University. He's a really smart cookie, and Red Cross are actually quite lucky to be involved in this because it solves a lot of problems that we have with connecting communities and allowing communities to communicate with each other. A big part of what Red Cross does is, it's called RFL, about connecting disconnected families, whether it's in a time of war or peace and disaster or whatever it might be, is reconnecting families that have lost touch with each other. And solutions like this can go a long way with helping find those people. Right, back to the NZRCITT ERU. It's the second time that picture's been used at this conference. I removed the American bits from it, but I left the star up there. We are a team of volunteers from around the country, managed by a full-time staff member at Red Cross HQ in Wellington. We are on the lookout for more team members. Without more team members coming in, we'll die of attrition. And we're looking for skilled people to come in as well, people with that are going to bring a technical skill set into the team. It's actually really easy to find people that are interested in this, but we become, if they're not bringing a technical skill set in, then we just become bottom heavy with people that we've got to train to do everything we need, and we lose the skills at the top to be able to teach those other people, but also we lose the innovation that we pour into these other projects that we're doing. So you do need to be flexible in your time commitments and have a very forgiving employer and or partner and family. My wife's sitting right here. We're a blended family with 7 children. Imagine how forgiving she is when I disappear for a month. A call to deploy anywhere in the world can be as little as 24 to 48 hours notice. It's kind of secret agent stuff. Pack your bag, we're going. But things like a Nepal earthquake, that was a really short notice. Things like a cyclone in the Pacific, you get a bit of forewarning that it's coming. We're predicting the cyclone's going to hit Tonga in a week's time. Who's available, just in case you need it? And so we'll sit and wait and see what happens. Anyone that remembers Tropical Cyclone Winston will know that it was heading towards Tonga and then went and then nailed Fiji. So it was very unpredictable. Whilst overseas on a mission, we do get paid a daily allowance and a delegate salary. No shoes. The riches come from the work you do to help others, not from the delegate salary. Submissions we've done. Tonga Red Cross had to move buildings. Termites ate the old one. That is a structural beam in the corner of a building, and there's really not much of it left, and that's obviously a stairwell. I was a bit nervous the first time I walked up there. The other side didn't look so bad. So their building got condemned and they had to move. They fed us a pig. We built them that. So we installed a new structured cabling system and core networking. The local Tonga telecom techs had not really seen anything of the standard before. They were so excited they invited all the other techs around to come and have a look at it. So that was kind of cool. And the pig was really nice, so we considered it a fair trade. We actually bought all of that stuff from New Zealand. Tonga does have a hardware supply store, and they did have some structured cabling, bits and pieces of equipment there, but it was kind of sporadic with what you can get. So we shipped all of that from New Zealand, and it all arrived on the same flight, which was awesome. Federated States of Micronesia training mission. We travelled to FSM to conduct training, the local national society, just in using their VHF radios, their repeaters, satellite phones and IT systems. The Red Cross is an organisation of volunteers, so the staff can be transient as volunteers come and go, and we're always needing to retrain or teach someone there to be the trainer to keep the skills up. And so it's not uncommon to do trips like that. These guys run an annual exercise with the local government that simulates a plane crash on the runway that blocks the only timely delivery method. Anything else to get to the island is a 2-week ship from Honolulu. And the FSM was a really interesting trip because you have to fly to Hawaii first, and you've got a 24-hour layover, which sucked in Hawaii. Yeah, it's terrible. And then you catch a United Airlines service called the Island Hopper. The only flight that does it's a 737 that will hop its way across islands across the Pacific. One of them being a super secret US military installation, and you're forbidden from taking photos even out the window of the airplane. It's Kwajalein, I would show you a photo because I did take one, but you can't say don't take a photo and then not take a photo. It's covered in satellite dishes and all high-tech, cool-looking stuff. And then so you hop across all these islands and people get on and off the airplane like a bus, and they're all carrying chili bins because that's how they cut their food between the islands. And then the flight hops all the way across the Pacific to Guam and then turns around and comes back the other way. But it only goes that way once a week and only goes this way once a week, so you've got to plan your trip around that. Fiji, Tropical Cyclone Winston. Fiji Red Cross IT systems were already broken and their local provider was struggling to make it work. The cyclone hit and the Red Cross National Society needed to, they're an organisation this size, and then after the disaster they become an organisation this size, and their IT systems didn't even work to start with. That is legitimately what it looked like in one of their rooms. So we tidied it up and rebuilt there's another larger cabinet in another building. The photo just didn't look as impressive as that one. We completely rebuilt their network from the ground up, pushed new images out to all their computers, and bought in so many new computers and got them all set up. And it's 18 months on, 20 months on now, and that network's still been rock solid, reliable. And it was because of what we did in Fiji with their network that really paved the way for the ZLT to exist, because the International Federation of the Red Cross suddenly saw, building networks that way does work. We should do more of that. Fiji highlights. That there, if everyone can tell what that is, that's some power wires connected together. I was running these blue network cables here. This is in the roof of the building called the safety office, would you believe? These are the Iridium short burst. These are the DeLorme InReach devices that we used to use, so we had to set up a whole lot of them to go out for part of the field assessment stuff. This here is the ferry that goes from Vanuatu to Taveuni, so the second largest island to the third largest island. Does not look safe at all. Probably isn't safe at all. Yes, they're climbing over pallets to get up onto the dock, and the weather is tanking down. Normally a 45-minute boat ride because there was a big storm that day, I did get on it. I prayed first, and it was about an hour and a half boat ride. And everyone sits inside. They massively overpack the boat. I don't know how they don't really have marine rules like we do. Well, they do, just no one enforces them. And it was so rough that everyone was sick. And they had a 20-litre paint bucket that they'd pass down the aisle that you'd have your turn spewing in, and then it would get emptied over and then passed back. And so I went and sat up here. I got thoroughly wet, but I didn't take part in the spew fest. So training, if you're interested in joining the team, this is the training commitment to be deployable. There's a 2-week training course, tech training course. Most of the people in the room would run rings around the technical side of it. You might need to learn a bit about radio, but on the IT side you'd probably find it quite simple. But it's more about how we use the equipment and how it gets deployed in the field, and how we work with other national societies to achieve that. Then you do a 1-week impact course, which is a Red Cross specific training course, which teaches you the Red Cross way of doing things and everything you need to know about being a Red Cross delegate. That's actually a highly sought after course to get on. So they advertise this impact course every year, and this is the path to be an international delegate for the Red Cross, whether it's a nurse or a shelter cluster member or a water and sanitation and hygiene expert or whatever. Everyone has to do this impact course before you can be internationally deployed. Then we do a security training course for 1 week. And that was quite interesting. I quite enjoyed that. We did a lot of fun stuff. One of the trainers, when he got it, there was actually a session on kidnapping, and he stood up the front and said, right, who in the room's been kidnapped? Because most of the people in the room were already Red Cross people. 3 people put their hands up. The lady beside me, she'd been kidnapped in Somalia, and it's like, oh man, actually, okay. They don't tell us how much our insurance is for kidnapping, because if we knew the answer and we're under duress in a kidnap situation, we'd likely tell them, the kidnappers, and then they'd know how much money to ask for to get the quickest cash. So they don't tell us for our own safety, nice of them. And we did cool things. We went to the Linton Army Camp, and we did vehicle evacuation drills while under simulated gunfire, and it was really quite cool. We do an advanced first aid certificate, which a lot of people might already have, and of course Red Cross can teach you that. They're now talking about training us to the FEC level, which is pre-hospital emergency care, so you will get quite advanced first aid skills. The training requirement is this here, it would often, for most volunteers, this would get spread over a couple of years, 2 or 3 years before you'd actually get everything done. Not many people can just take that much time off in a year to go and do all these courses. Once you've completed the 2-week tech training course, however, we would consider you for the Pacific bilateral stuff, the training missions or working in some of these other projects and deploying that stuff in the Pacific, because you're not likely to get kidnapped in Fiji. Not likely. Passport, ability to travel. You don't have to have a New Zealand passport, but it helps because Kiwis are fairly broadly accepted around the world, and our visa waiver program extends quite far and wide. Even when I went to the Solomons, no, it was Papua New Guinea with another delegate. She was travelling on an Australian passport, and she thought she didn't need to get a visa, but you did to get into Papua New Guinea. We're Kiwis, come on in. If you've got a dodgy pass and a record as a result, then you're not so useful, as plenty of countries won't let you in, if you're honest about it. You need to be able to travel to the US. We're not ever likely to deploy there, but it's pretty common we might transit through there to get to somewhere else. Red Cross does cover all the travel and accommodation costs, so while it's largely considered a volunteer thing, even with the delegate salary, they cover. I don't actually have to pay any money to be part of it. They'll cover all your travel, accommodation, transfer costs. They insure you with an international insurance policy, and everything else is taken care of. You get vaccinated to the hills. I don't even know what Japanese encephalitis is, but I'm never going to get it. So. Be real about it. Everyone enjoys the idea of being an international disaster response delegate. Sounds pretty cool, and it'll probably even get you a date. But your heart needs to be in the right place. It's about supporting and better equipping vulnerable communities. Whilst you do get them, it's not about travel experiences, and you will end up in some pretty dim locations. We don't get to stay in the fancy resorts. It's generally the cheaper accommodation that's not so flash at all. We've got 7 fundamental principles that underpin everything the Red Cross does. I won't go into the details of that, but you do have to get your head around it and live by those standards, and they are fairly tight rules. If you put a foot out of line and hug someone inappropriately, you can be sent home. The Red Cross strives to be the most neutral, least corrupt, most safest seen organisation in the world for obvious reasons. Everyone wants to be able to trust the Red Cross, particularly in a time of need. And so they run a very tight ship on the rules and regulations and how you need to conduct yourself. Even if you're away on a mission and you go and get drunk every night in your own time, they won't tolerate it. You'll be off home. So you do need to keep your socks up. No shoes. If you're interested, please come see me. Or I'll just, given everyone now wants to go for a beer, I'll just give you a business card and you can contact me. But we do need more team members. We aim to have 30 people on the team, 30 deployable people on the team, because when a disaster does come around and we put the word out who's available, we get about a 1 in 10 hit rate, and we need to send at least 3 people. And currently we've only got a little bit over 20 deployable people, so we're short. So if this sounds like you are your own boss and have an understanding wife, hey, Jonathan, you'll be a great fit. No family, no children yet.
Is that why you asked me that yesterday?
I've subliminally surveyed the crowd, and yeah, I really do want to talk. It's a really fun team, really relaxed. Dare I say it, if you're a female, it's an easy in, because Red Cross has a gender equality mandate to reach, and there's a lot of pressure on our team leader to sort that out. And there's 20 guys and 2 girls, so it's easy to get in. And it's really rewarding work. It really, really is. Just the difference you can make, the friends you can make, just seeing people move on and upwards in the face of a really tragic disaster is really quite a rewarding experience. Thank you very much. It's me.
Right, so we're finished. Just to wrap up, no, it's never that quick. Just a quick shout out to our sponsors again. Just please, if you are in a procurement situation and you're thinking, who could I use for that? Clearly, look at our sponsors and at least get a quote. Yeah, and thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for sticking it out. And we have no idea where we're going to be next year. A few years ago, we thought about the places we could go, and we came up with 3 or 4 places, and we've now been to them all. So, so we'll go. we'll go somewhere where there might be air conditioning. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next year. See you later.